Zara felt her heart beating fast as the transport ship slowly came to a stop. Through the small window, she could see the human space station getting bigger and bigger. Looked nothing like the crystal buildings back home on Valara. Everything here was made of metal and glass, with bright lights everywhere. She took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror one more time. Her silver blue skin seemed to shine more than usual today. Maybe it was because she was nervous, or maybe it was the strange lighting in the ship. Either way, she knew she had to look perfect. This was the most important day of her life. "You can do this, Zara," she whispered to herself. "You've been training for this moment for months." The door of the transport ship opened with a soft whoosh. Cool air rushed in, carrying unfamiliar smells. Zara stepped out carefully, her long formal robes flowing behind her. The fabric was made from the finest silk on her planet, dyed in deep purple with golden threads running through it. Her people had chosen these colors specifically for this meeting. Purple meant peace, and gold meant friendship. As she walked down the corridor, her footsteps echoed softly. The walls were covered with strange symbols and pictures that she didn't understand. Everything felt so different from home. On Valara, the buildings were quiet and peaceful, with soft music playing in the background. Here she could hear the hum of machines and the distant sound of voices. Zara touched the small device attached to her ear. It was a translator that would help her understand and speak the human language. She had tested it many times during her training, but she still worried it might not work properly when she needed it most. She thought about her family back home. Her parents had been so proud when she was chosen for this mission. Being the youngest, cultural liaison in the history of the Valerian Council was a huge honor, but it also meant she carried the hopes and dreams of her entire planet on her shoulders. The hallway seemed to go on forever. With each step, Zara reviewed the greeting ceremony in her mind. First, she would bow slowly, keeping her eyes down, to show respect. Then she would lift her head and look directly at the human ambassador. After that, she would place her hands together in front of her chest and speak the ancient words of greeting in both languages. "Greetings, honored one. I come in peace from the stars beyond, carrying the hopes of my people for friendship between our worlds." She had practiced these words thousands of times. They had to be perfect. The way she said them, the tone of her voice, even how she moved her hands, everything mattered. Her teachers had told her that humans were very particular about first impressions. Zara remembered her final lesson with Elder Theron, the wisest member of the Valerian Council. He had white hair that sparkled like starlight and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. "Remember, young one," he had said, "humans are very different from us. They are louder, more emotional, and they move quickly. Do not let this frighten you. Stick to our traditions, and you will honor our people." The corridor finally opened into a larger area. There were windows everywhere, and through them, Zara could see the vast darkness of space dotted with countless stars. For a moment, she felt homesick. Somewhere out there, beyond those stars, was her home planet with its purple skies and silver oceans. She could hear voices getting closer. Human voices. They sounded so different from the soft, musical tones of her people. These voices were deeper, more varied, and they seemed to rise and fall in strange patterns. Zara stopped in front of a large door. This was it. Behind this door was Ambassador Chen, the human, who would decide whether their two civilizations could become friends. She had studied everything about him during her training. He was older, experienced, and highly respected among his people. The reports said he was fair but serious, and that he always followed proper procedures. She closed her eyes and took 3 deep breaths, just like her meditation teacher had taught her. With each breath, she felt her nervousness fade away, replaced by calm determination. She was ready. The door began to open slowly. Bright light spilled out, temporarily blinding her. As her eyes adjusted, she could see a figure standing in the middle of the room. This was Ambassador Chen. He was taller than she had expected, with kind eyes and gray hair. He was wearing a dark blue uniform with shiny buttons and some kind of badges on his chest. Zara stepped forward into the room, her robes rustling softly. The moment had finally arrived. She began to bow, just as she had practiced when something unexpected happened. The ambassador was moving toward her, but he wasn't preparing for the formal greeting she had been taught. Instead, his arms were opening wide, and there was a warm smile on his face. He was walking straight toward her with his arms outstretched. This wasn't in any of her training materials. This wasn't what she had prepared for. Her mind went blank as she tried to understand. What was happening? Was this some kind of human greeting she didn't know about? Had she missed something in her studies? Time seemed to slow down as the ambassador came closer and closer. Zara stood frozen, not knowing what to do. All her careful preparation, all her practiced words seemed to disappear from her mind. She was about to experience something no Valerian had ever experienced before. Ambassador Chen had been waiting in the meeting room for almost an hour. He kept checking his watch and adjusting his tie. This was the biggest moment of his career, maybe even the biggest moment in human history. First contact with an alien species. The weight of it made his stomach feel tight. He had read every report about the Valerians that his team could find. They were peaceful, intelligent, and had technology far beyond anything humans had ever seen. But what struck him most was how young their representative was. Zara was barely an adult by their standards, sent to represent an entire civilization. Chen walked over to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a whole planet full of beings who had never met a human before. The thought both excited and terrified him. What if he said the wrong thing? What if he accidentally offended them? The future of both species could depend on the next few minutes. His assistant had given him a thick folder full of protocols and procedures. There were specific ways to bow, certain words to say, and exact distances to maintain. Everything had to be perfect. But as Chen flipped through the pages, something felt wrong. All these rules seemed so cold and distant. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was about the same age as this alien girl, when his daughter was nervous or scared. She didn't need formal speeches or ceremonial bows. She needed warmth, kindness, and someone to tell her everything would be okay. The door chimed, indicating someone was approaching. Chen quickly straightened his uniform and took his position in the center of the room. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. This was it. History was about to be made. The door opened slowly, and Chen got his first look at a real alien being. She was beautiful in a way he had never imagined. Her skin seemed to glow with a soft, silver-blue light, and her eyes were larger than human eyes, filled with intelligence and something else, fear. She was scared. This powerful alien representative who had traveled across the galaxy to meet with him was just as nervous as he was. Maybe more so. Zara stepped into the room wearing the most elegant robes Chen had ever seen. They flowed around her like liquid starlight, and he could see her hands shaking slightly as she moved. She looked so young, so vulnerable, so far from home. In that moment, all of Chen's diplomatic training flew out the window. He didn't see an alien representative or a political negotiator. He saw a young person who was scared and trying to be brave. He saw someone who needed comfort, not ceremony. Without thinking, Chen started walking toward her. His arms opened naturally, the way they did when his daughter came home from school upset about something. This wasn't about politics or treaties or following protocols. This was about one person reaching out to another person who needed help. The look on Zara's face changed from nervous concentration to complete confusion. She had started to bow, just like her training had taught her, but then she stopped. Her large eyes grew even wider as she watched Chen approach with his arms outstretched. Chen could see that she didn't understand what was happening. For a split second, he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. But then he saw something in her expression that made him keep walking. Behind the confusion, behind the fear, he could see hope. "Welcome," Chen said softly, his voice full of genuine warmth. "I'm so glad you made it here safely." He was close enough now to see the intricate patterns woven into her robes. Close enough to notice that her skin seemed to shimmer like water under moonlight. She was trembling slightly, and Chen's heart went out to her. This was someone's daughter, someone's hope for the future. She had probably left everything she knew and loved to come here and try to build a bridge between their worlds. The least he could do was show her that humans were capable of kindness. Chen gently wrapped his arms around the young alien, pulling her into a warm embrace. It was the most natural thing in the world, as automatic as breathing. He felt her stiffen in surprise, but he didn't let go. Sometimes people needed to be held, even if they didn't know it yet. "Everything's going to be okay," he whispered, the same words he had said to his daughter 1,000 times. "You're safe here. We're going to figure this out together." He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and irregular like a frightened bird. Her skin was cooler than human skin, but not uncomfortably so. She smelled like something he couldn't identify, maybe like rain on metal, or the air after lightning. For Chen, this hug represented everything he believed about humanity. When faced with something unknown, something different, their first instinct should be to reach out with compassion. Not to fear or judge, but to welcome and protect. He had no idea that he was completely rewriting the rules of interspecies diplomacy. He didn't know that no Valerian had ever been hugged before, or that physical contact between strangers was almost unthinkable in their culture. All he knew was that a young person needed comfort, and he was going to provide it. As they stood there in that embrace, Chen felt something shift in the room.
Oh.
The tension that had been building for months seemed to melt away. Whatever happened next, they had started with kindness, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. The moment Chen's arms wrapped around her, Zara's entire world stopped. Her mind went completely blank, like someone had just turned off all the lights in a room. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nothing in her training had prepared her for this. Valara, people didn't touch each other like this, ever. Even her own parents had never held her this way. The closest thing to physical contact in her culture was the ceremonial forehead touching, and that only happened during the most important occasions. What was happening to her right now was completely impossible by Valerian standards. But here she was, wrapped in the arms of a human she had just met, and something strange was happening inside her chest. Her heart was still beating fast, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was something else, something she had never felt before. Chen's embrace was warm and gentle. She could feel his heartbeat through his uniform, steady and strong. It was so different from the racing rhythm of her own heart. His arms felt safe, like they were protecting her from all the scary things in the universe. For the first time since leaving her home planet, Zara felt like she wasn't alone. "What is this?" she thought to herself. "What is he doing to me?" Her translator was working perfectly, so she could understand his words. "Everything's going to be okay," he had said. "You're safe here." But it wasn't just the words that made her feel better. It was the way he said them, the way his voice was soft and caring, like he actually meant it. Zara had expected this meeting to be all about politics and trade agreements. She had prepared speeches about mining rights and shipping routes. She had memorized facts about human technology and military capabilities, but none of that seemed to matter now. This human wasn't treating her like a representative of an alien government. He was treating her like family. The thought hit her like lightning. Family, that's what this feeling was. Chen was holding her the way she had always wished her parents would hold her, with unconditional love and acceptance. No formal ceremonies, no ancient words, no careful protocols. It's just pure, simple affection. Tears started forming in her eyes. On Valera, crying was considered a sign of weakness, something to be hidden away. But here, in this human's arms, she didn't feel weak. She felt understood. She felt valued. She felt like she mattered, not because of her title or her mission, but just because she was herself. "I don't understand," she whispered against Chen's shoulder. Her voice was shaking, but she didn't care. "Why are you doing this?" Chen pulled back slightly so he could look at her face. His eyes were kind and patient, like he had all the time in the world to answer her questions. "Because you looked like you needed it," he said simply. "And because that's what we do for people. We care. About people we care about." The words echoed in Zara's mind. But they had just met. How could he possibly care about her already? On her planet, caring about someone took time. It required careful observation, formal introductions, and gradual building of trust. You couldn't just immediately care about a stranger. But looking into Chen's eyes, Zara realized that maybe humans were different. Maybe they could care about someone instantly, without needing to know everything about them first. Maybe they could see past the surface differences and connect with the person underneath. On my world, Zara said slowly, we don't. We don't do this. We bow to each other. We keep our distance, speak formal words, and follow ancient customs. I was supposed to greet you with a ceremony that my people have used for thousands of years. Chen nodded, listening carefully. Tell me about it, he said. I want to understand. So Zara explained. She told him about the precise bowing angles, the specific words that had to be spoken, the careful positioning of hands and feet. As she talked, she realized how cold and distant it all sounded. There was no warmth in her people's traditions, no real connection between individuals. It sounds beautiful, Chen said when she finished. Very dignified and respectful. But can I ask you something? Zara nodded. How did it feel when I hugged? You, not what you thought about it, but how did it actually feel? Zara was quiet for a long moment. How could she explain something she had never experienced before?
Ow.
How could she put into words the feeling of being completely accepted by someone who didn't even know her name? It felt like ... double quotes. She paused, searching for the right words. Felt like coming home. Like I had been lost in space for years, and suddenly I found a place where I belonged. It felt like you were telling me that I was important, not because of my job or my planet, but just because I exist. Chen smiled, and Zara noticed that his eyes were getting a little watery too. That's exactly what I was trying to tell you, he said. In that moment, Zara understood something profound. The formal ceremonies and ancient protocols of her people weren't wrong, but they weren't the only way to show respect and friendship. Sometimes the most powerful communication happened without words at all. She looked around the room with new eyes. The cold metal walls suddenly seemed warmer. Bright lights felt welcoming instead of harsh. Everything looked different because she was seeing it through the lens of human kindness. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for showing me that. There are different ways to welcome someone. Thank you for making me feel like I matter. Chen's smile grew wider.
You do matter, Zara, more than you know.
As they slowly separated from the hug, both Chen and Zara felt like something important had just happened. The air in the room seemed different now, charged with a new kind of energy. It wasn't the nervous tension from before, but something warmer and more hopeful. Chen noticed that Zara's eyes were still glistening with tears, and he worried he might have done something wrong. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to upset you. Just wanted to make you feel welcome. Zara shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. No, you didn't upset me. These are good tears. Happy tears. I just... I've never felt anything like that before. Chen looked confused. You've never been hugged before? Never, Zara confirmed. My people don't show affection that way. We have our own customs, but they're very different from what you just did. It's fascinated Chen. He had always taken hugs for granted. His parents had hugged him as a child. He hugged his daughter every day, and he hugged his friends when they were happy or sad. It was such a basic part of human connection that he couldn't imagine life without it. Would you like to show me? Chen asked gently. Your traditional greeting? I'd love to learn about it. Zara's face lit up. No human had ever asked to learn about Valerian customs before? She felt honored that he wanted to understand her culture. Of course, she said, stepping back to give herself room. But first, let me explain what each part means. She began to demonstrate the traditional Valerian greeting, moving slowly so Chen could follow along. First we bow like this, she said, bending at the waist with her hands at her sides. The depth of the bow shows how much respect we have for the other person. Chen tried to copy her movement, but his bow was awkward and unsteady. Zara giggled softly. It's okay, it takes practice. Now when we straighten up, we look directly into each other's eyes. This shows that we're being honest and truthful. They stood facing each other, making eye contact. Chen was surprised by how intense it felt, with humans looking directly at. Someone for this long might feel uncomfortable, but with Zara, it felt meaningful and important. Next, Zara continued. We place our hands together in front of our hearts like this. She pressed her palms together and held them against her chest. This shows that our intentions come from the heart, not from the mind. Chen copied her gesture, and Zara nodded approvingly. It's very good. Now comes the most important part. We stepped forward and touched foreheads. They moved closer to each other, and Zara gently placed her forehead against Chen's. Her skin was cool and smooth, and Chen could feel a slight tingle where they touched. It was peaceful and calming, completely different from the warmth and energy of a hug or touching. Zara whispered, "We speak the ancient words of greeting. In my language, they sound like this." She said something in Valerian that sounded like music, all flowing vowels and soft consonants. "What do the words mean?" Chen asked, still keeping his forehead pressed against hers. "They mean, I see the light of the stars in your spirit, and I honor the journey that brought you to this moment." Chen felt goosebumps on his arms. "That's beautiful, Zara. It's so much more meaningful than just saying hello." They held the position for a few more seconds, then slowly stepped apart. Chen felt strangely peaceful, like he had just experienced something sacred. "Now I understand," he said. "Your greeting is about respect and honoring each other's journey. It's more formal than a hug, but it's also very deep and meaningful." Zara smiled. "Exactly. In your greeting, the hug is about immediate connection and comfort. It's about saying you're not alone without needing any words." They spent the next hour exploring the differences between their cultures. Chen taught Zara about handshakes, high fives, and how humans pat each other on the back to show support. Zara showed him other Valerian gestures, like how they touched their temples to show they were thinking, or how they placed their hands over their hearts when they felt gratitude. "It's amazing," Chen said as they practiced different greetings. "Our ways of showing care are so different, but they're both trying to do the same thing, make the other person feel valued and accepted." Zara nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Dodd. And maybe that's what's important. Not the exact way we do it, but the feeling behind it." Chen had an idea. "What if we created a new greeting? Something that combines both our traditions?" Zara's eyes widened with excitement. "That would be incredible. A greeting that belongs to both humans and Valerians." They spent the next 30 minutes experimenting. They tried bowing first, then hugging. They tried the forehead touch followed by a handshake. Some combinations felt awkward, but others felt natural and meaningful. Finally, they found something that worked. They would start with the Valerian bow, showing respect. Then they would step forward and place one hand on each other's shoulder, making eye contact. Finally, they would touch foreheads briefly while speaking words of welcome in both languages. "This is perfect," Zara said as they practiced their new greeting. "It has the respect and ceremony of my people, but also the warmth and connection of yours." Chen felt proud of what they had created together. "It's not just a greeting," he said. "A symbol of how our two species can work together. We don't have to choose between our different ways. We can honor both." As they perfected their new greeting, both Chen and Zara realized that something special was happening. They weren't just two representatives meeting for political reasons anymore. They were becoming friends, building a bridge between their worlds one gesture at a time. "You know," Zara said thoughtfully, "I think this greeting could change everything. When I go back to my planet and show this to my people, they'll see that friendship with humans is possible. And when you share this with other humans, they'll understand that we Valerians aren't so different after all." Chen nodded, feeling hopeful about the future for the first time since this whole process began. "I think you're right. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures." 3 hours later, when other diplomats and officials finally joined them in the meeting room, they found something completely unexpected. Chen and Zara weren't sitting on opposite sides of a formal table arguing about trade agreements. Instead, they were standing together, laughing as they practiced their new greeting for the 10th time. "I think you're getting the hang of it," Zara said with a smile. As Chen successfully completed the bow-shoulder touch forehead sequence they had created together, the other humans in the room looked shocked. They'd expected tension, careful, negotiations, maybe even conflict. But what they saw was two people who had clearly become friends. The atmosphere in the room was warm and relaxed, nothing like the formal diplomatic meetings they were used to. "Ambassador Chen," one of the human officials whispered, "what exactly has been happening here?" Chen looked at his colleagues with a big smile. "We've been learning about each other," he said simply, "and I think we've figured out something important." The formal diplomatic session that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. Instead of reading from prepared speeches, Chen and Zara talked like friends, sharing stories. They discussed not just trade and politics, but culture, art, and what life was like on their respective worlds. When disagreements came up, they handled them differently too. Instead of arguing, they would use their new greeting to reconnect, reminding themselves that they were working together toward the same goal. The simple act of touching foreheads seemed to wash away any tension and bring them back to a place of understanding. "You know," Zara said during a break in the negotiations, "I never expected this mission to change me so much. I came here thinking I knew exactly how things should be done. But you've shown me that there are many ways to build friendships." Chen nodded, feeling the same way. "I learned something too. I used to think that being warm and friendly was always the right approach. But your traditional greeting taught me that sometimes respect and ceremony are just as important as warmth." The other officials watched in amazement. As the two representatives worked through complex issues with patience and creativity, every problem seemed to have a solution when approached with genuine care and understanding by the end of the day. They had not only signed a basic friendship agreement between their species, but it also created something much more valuable, a new model for how different cultures could interact with each other. 6 months later, Zara stood in front of the Valerian High Council, the most important governing body on her planet. The chamber was filled with hundreds of her people, all wearing traditional robes and sitting in perfect rows. Everything was orderly and formal, just as it had always been. But Zara was different now. She stood straighter, smiled more easily, and spoke with a confidence that surprised even herself. "Honored council members," she began, using the traditional opening words, "I have returned from the human worlds with more than just a treaty. I have brought back a new understanding of what friendship can look like." She told them about her meeting with Chen, about the unexpected hug that had changed everything, and about the new greeting they had created together. Some of the older council members looked skeptical, but many of the younger Valerians seemed fascinated. "I propose that we establish cultural exchange programs," Zara continued. "Not just for trade or politics, but for learning. Let some of our young people visit human worlds, and let some humans come here to learn about our ways." Her old teacher stood up slowly. "Young Zara," he said, "what you're suggesting is very different from our traditional approach. How do we know this is wise?" Zara smiled and walked over to him. "May I show you something, Elder?" She demonstrated the combined greeting with one of the younger council members. The room watched in silence as they bowed, placed hands on shoulders, made eye contact, touched foreheads while speaking words of welcome in both languages. When they finished, Elder Theron's eyes were wide with surprise. "That was ... beautiful," he said softly. "It felt like our traditional greeting, but with something extra, something warmer." "That's exactly what it is," Zara explained. "It's our wisdom combined with human warmth. It's proof that we can honor our traditions while still growing and learning." The council voted to approve her proposal. Within a year, the first group of young Valerians was preparing to visit Earth, while a group of human students was getting ready to come to Valera. Meanwhile, on the human space station, Chen was implementing changes of his own. He had started training other diplomats in the new greeting style, and it was being used in meetings with other alien species they had contacted. "It's amazing," Chen told his assistant one day. "Ever since we started using elements of Valerian greeting customs, our diplomatic meetings have become much more respectful and thoughtful. People take time to really listen to each other." Chen had also started a program where human diplomats would spend time learning about the cultures they were meeting with, not just their politics and economics. He wanted every first contact to be as successful as his meeting with Zara had been. 1 year after their first meeting, Chen and Zara met again at the same space station. This time, they weren't alone. There were dozens of humans and Valerians, working together, sharing ideas and building friendships. "Look at what we started," Zara said, watching a group of human and Valerian children playing together, seamlessly switching between different greeting styles depending on who they were talking to. Chen smiled, feeling proud of how far they had Come, you know what the best part is? That hug I gave you wasn't planned. It wasn't part of any strategy or diplomatic technique. It was just one person trying to comfort another person who seemed scared. And that's exactly why it worked, Zara replied. Because it was real. It came from the heart, not from a rule book. They stood together, watching as humans and Valerians worked side by side. Their different approaches to communication and connection, creating something beautiful and new. The simple act of reaching out with kindness had grown into something that was changing both their worlds. I think, Chen said quietly, this is just the beginning. Zara nodded, placing her hand on his shoulder in the gesture that had become natural for both of them. The beginning of something wonderful. And as they watched their two species learning from each other, building bridges of understanding one greeting at a time. Both Chen and Zara knew that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with the smallest acts of love.